For as long as we have had the technology to listen, the stars have been silent. Our radio telescopes, the great ears of our planet, have been trained on the heavens for decades, listening for a single artificial whisper in the vast cosmic static, but we have found nothing. This profound and deafening quiet is known as the Fermi Paradox. But what if the silence is not an absence? What if it is a choice, a deliberate and universal policy of non-interference? What if we are being observed right now by intelligences so ancient and so advanced that we are to them like animals in a protected and perfectly managed nature preserve? Before we journey further, feel free to leave a comment with from what location you're watching this and what time it is there. Now, settle in as our exploration truly begins. The formal name for this chilling and strangely logical idea is the zoo hypothesis. First proposed in a serious scientific context by MIT radio astronomer John Ball in 1973, it offers a deeply unsettling solution to the Fermi paradox. The hypothesis posits that the galaxy is, in fact, teeming with advanced intelligent extraterrestrial societies. It suggests that the first species to achieve interstellar travel, a primordial and ancient intelligence, may have established itself as the dominant force in the galaxy billions of years ago. This original ancient civilization and the others that followed would have long since explored and mapped the entire Milky Way, and in doing so they would have discovered countless worlds like our own, worlds where life was just beginning its long, slow, and chaotic journey towards intelligence. Faced with these cosmic nurseries, this ancient galactic club would have had to make a choice: interfere or observe. The zoo hypothesis argues that they chose to observe. They designated worlds like Earth as cosmic zoos or wilderness preserves, setting them aside for the natural, unhindered evolution of life and consciousness. The motivations for such a strange and universal policy of non-intervention are as vast and as varied as the civilizations that might be enforcing it. The most optimistic and perhaps most comforting interpretation is that this policy is born of a deep and ancient ethical framework, a galactic prime directive. These ancient, wise, and perhaps benevolent civilizations may understand that direct contact with their overwhelmingly superior technology and culture would be catastrophic for a primitive, developing species like our own. The sudden revelation that we are not alone and that we are galactic infants would instantly destroy our cultures, our religions, our sciences, and our very sense of self. It would be an act of profound cultural vandalism. And so, out of a sense of compassion and respect, they have chosen to watch from a safe and silent distance, allowing us to find our own path, to make our own mistakes, and to achieve our own destiny, whatever that may be. The silence in this view is a gift. It is the gift of being allowed to grow up on our own. A more scientific and less emotional motivation for the quarantine might be one of pure, dispassionate research. A world like Earth, a planet where life has spontaneously arisen and has been allowed to evolve for 4.5 billion years, is an incredibly rare and precious scientific experiment. We are a living laboratory for the study of biology, of evolution, and of the emergence of consciousness. An advanced ancient civilization would see our planet as a priceless natural resource, a place to observe the fundamental processes of the universe unfold in real time. For them to interfere, to make contact, would be to contaminate their own experiment. It would be like a biologist, studying the natural behavior of a rare and endangered species, suddenly walking into the middle of their habitat and announcing their presence. The natural behavior would instantly cease, and so they watch us through their undetectable instruments, gathering data, studying our development, and ensuring that their grand experiment remains pure and uncontaminated by outside influence. Our entire history, from the first single-celled organism to the rise of our own global civilization, is, in this view, a single, long-running data point in a galactic study of life itself. But there is a final, and far darker and more menacing, interpretation of the zoo hypothesis. The quarantine may not be for our protection at all. It may be for theirs. We must consider how our own species might appear to an ancient, stable, and perhaps peaceful galactic civilization, a young, rapidly expanding, and historically violent species like humanity. A species that has gone from the stone axe to the thermonuclear bomb in the blink of a cosmic eye might be seen as a cosmic plague, a dangerous and unpredictable force that needs to be contained and studied from a safe distance until it either self-destructs or matures into a more stable and less threatening form of intelligence. The zoo is not a park, it is a cage, a perfectly constructed quarantine cell. They are watching us, not with scientific curiosity or benevolent compassion, but with a cold and calculating sense of self-preservation. They are waiting to see if we can pass our own great filter, if we can overcome our own self-destructive tendencies. If we succeed, perhaps we will be invited to join the galactic community. If we fail, they will simply note the result and continue their silent watch over the next emerging intelligence on some other distant world. The logic of the zoo hypothesis, whether one views it as a benevolent act of preservation or a menacing act of quarantine, is disturbingly sound. But it begs an even greater and more practical question. How would such a quarantine be enforced? How could a galactic civilization, or a consortium of them, monitor a single, noisy, and technologically active planet like Earth for thousands of years without ever being definitively and unambiguously detected? The search for an answer to this question takes us away from the grand philosophical theories and into the strange, controversial, and deeply unsettling phenomenon of unidentified aerial phenomena, the so-called UFOs. Are these persistent, global sightings merely misidentifications, atmospheric effects, and human fantasies? Or could they be the fleeting, ghostly evidence of the zookeeper's drones, the silent, automated, and non-interactive sentinels, tasked with the ancient and ongoing mission of watching over our world? The logic of the zoo hypothesis, whether one views its implications as benevolent or menacing, is disturbingly sound and internally consistent. It provides a chillingly complete explanation for the profound and otherwise paradoxical silence of the cosmos. But it begs an even greater and more practical question. If we are indeed living within a cosmic preserve, if our world is the subject of a long-term, non-interactive study, then how would such a quarantine be enforced and maintained? How could a galactic civilization, or a consortium of them, silently monitor a single, noisy, and technologically adolescent planet like Earth for thousands of years without ever being definitively and unambiguously detected? The search for an answer to this question takes us away from the grand philosophical theories of the cosmos and into the strange, controversial, and deeply unsettling phenomenon of unidentified aerial phenomena, the so-called UFOs. For decades, this subject has been relegated to the fringes of science and the realm of popular fiction. But a profound shift has occurred. The phenomenon is now being taken seriously at the highest levels of government and defense, and the evidence, when viewed through the specific lens of the zoo hypothesis, begins to look less like a series of random, unrelated events, and more like the fleeting, ghostly evidence of the zookeeper's drones. The silent, automated, and non-interactive sentinels tasked with the ancient and ongoing mission of watching over our world. For most of the last 70 years, the study of UFOs has been a cultural and scientific minefield, filled with blurry photographs, anecdotal tales, and a powerful stigma that has prevented serious, mainstream investigation. But in the last decade, that has changed completely. The United States Department of Defense has officially released a series of stunning, high-resolution infrared videos captured by the advanced sensor pods of its most sophisticated fighter jets, showing unidentified objects performing maneuvers that are, by our current understanding of physics and aerodynamics, completely impossible. Credible, highly trained and decorated military pilots have come forward to give sworn testimony before the United States Congress, describing their routine encounters with these objects. Craft that exhibit a level of technology so far beyond our own, it is almost magical. The subject of UFDs is no longer a fringe conspiracy theory. It is an acknowledged and deeply troubling matter of national security and scientific inquiry, and the consistent, observable behaviors of these objects. What investigators now call the five observables paint a picture of a technology that seems perfectly and exclusively designed for one single purpose: clandestine, non-interactive observation. The first of these observables is instantaneous, or extreme, acceleration. Witnesses and sensor data repeatedly describe objects that are hovering, completely motionless, and then accelerate to hypersonic speeds in the blink of an eye, with no visible effort and no sonic boom. The second is hypersonic velocities. These objects have been reliably tracked, moving at speeds in excess of 10 or even 20 times the speed of sound within our atmosphere, speeds that would tear any known human aircraft apart. The third is low observability, or stealth. These craft appear to have the ability to become invisible to, and then reappear on, our most advanced radar systems, as well as to the naked eye. The fourth is transmedium travel. There are multiple credible accounts of these objects moving seamlessly and at incredible speeds from the air directly into the water of the ocean and then back out again, with no change in performance, and without even creating a splash. And the fifth, and perhaps most baffling, is the complete lack of any visible means of propulsion. These objects, which are often described as perfect spheres, cubes, or the now famous tic-tac shape, have no wings, no control surfaces, no air intakes, and no hot exhaust. They move with an apparent mastery over gravity itself. When we analyze these five consistently reported characteristics through the lens of the zoo hypothesis, a chilling and logical pattern emerges. This is exactly what the zookeeper's drones would look like. They are not built for combat. They are not built for communication. Their entire design philosophy appears to be built around the principle of observation without detection. Their stealth capabilities and their ability to appear and disappear from our sensors would be the primary requirement for a long-term, clandestine surveillance mission. Their instantaneous extreme acceleration would not be for a dogfight. It would be an escape mechanism, a way to instantly evade any attempt by our primitive aircraft to get too close or to get a definitive weapons lock. Their ability to travel seamlessly between the air and the deep ocean would be a necessary feature for a probe that is tasked with monitoring a planet that is 70% covered in water. And most tellingly of all is the almost complete absence of any overtly hostile action, despite thousands of close-range encounters with our own military assets. These objects almost never display any form of aggression. They appear to be passively, silently, and patiently watching. Their behavior is not that of a military scout. It is the behavior of a scientific instrument. One of the most well-documented and credible of these encounters occurred in 2004 off the coast of California, involving the USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group. For 2 weeks, the Navy's most advanced radar system, the SEP-Y-1, had been tracking a series of strange, unidentified objects that were appearing in the sky, dropping from an altitude of 80,000 feet to just above the water in a matter of seconds. The commander of the F-18 squadron, David Fravor, was diverted to investigate. What he and his wingman encountered was a smooth, white, wingless, tick-tock-shaped object about 40 feet long, hovering erratically just above the churning waves. As Fravor began a slow circular descent to get a closer look, the object seemed to react. It began to ascend, mirroring his own flight path. Fravor then decided to cut across the circle, to meet it in the middle. The moment he did so, the object performed an act of impossible acceleration, instantly vanishing from his sight. Less than a minute later, the USS Princeton, which was still tracking the object on radar, reported that it had reappeared at the F-18's secret rendezvous point, their cap point, some 60 miles away. The object had not only demonstrated a technology far beyond our own, but it seemed to demonstrate a kind of precognitive intelligence, anticipating the pilot's actions and destination. It was not just a machine, it was a smart machine. This strange, passive, and yet deeply intelligent behavior is compounded by another, even more disturbing pattern. For decades, researchers have documented the persistent and recurring presence of these unidentified objects over our most sensitive and most dangerous military installations, nuclear weapons facilities. From the Malmstrom Air Force Base incident in 1967, where multiple credible Air Force personnel witnessed a glowing red orb hovering over their nuclear missile silos at the exact same moment that 10 of their intercontinental ballistic missiles mysteriously went offline, to similar events at nuclear weapons storage depots in the United Kingdom and the former Soviet Union. The pattern is consistent. These objects appear to have a specific and profound interest in our ability to wage nuclear war. In the context of the zoo hypothesis, this is a chilling and logical behavior. Are the zookeepers monitoring our most dangerous technology? Is their presence a silent and untranslatable warning? Are they concerned that the animals in the zoo have developed a technology, the power of the atom, that could not only destroy themselves and their own habitat, but could perhaps even pose a threat to the wider cosmic neighborhood? The persistent, silent watch over our nuclear weapons may be the most powerful evidence that the Great Filter, the final test of a young civilization, is our own self-destructive nature, and that the zookeepers are patiently watching to see if we will pass or if we will fail. The persistent and inexplicable presence of these advanced, silent objects in our skies, particularly around our most sensitive military sites, paints a picture that is disturbingly consistent with the core tenets of the zoo hypothesis. We may be under the constant, passive, and almost completely undetectable surveillance of an unknown and perhaps unknowable intelligence. But this raises a question of history. If they are watching us now with their silent tick-tock-shaped drones, then how long have they been here? Is the UFD phenomenon a modern event, a reaction to our own recent development of nuclear weapons and spaceflight? Or can we find the ghostly fingerprints of these same silent observers, these same celestial zookeepers, hidden in the myths, the art, and the sacred stories of the ancient world? The persistent and inexplicable presence of advanced, silent, and non-interactive objects in our modern skies paints a picture that is disturbingly consistent with the core tenets of the zoo hypothesis. We may be under the constant, passive, and almost completely undetectable surveillance of an unknown and perhaps unknowable intelligence. But this disturbing possibility raises an even more profound question of history. If they are watching us now with their silent, tick-tock-shaped drones, then for how long have they been here? Is this UAP phenomenon a modern event, a reaction to our own recent and dangerous development of nuclear weapons and spaceflight, or is it a pattern that stretches back much, much further? The search for evidence must now turn from the modern, digital reports of military pilots and radar operators to the ancient, analog records of our most distant ancestors. Is it possible that we can find the ghostly fingerprints of these same silent observers, these same celestial zookeepers, hidden in the myths, the art, and the sacred stories of the ancient world. Our ancient myths and legends are a fossil record of human consciousness. They are the primary way our ancestors, in a time before written language and formal science, encoded and transmitted their most important knowledge across the generations. Their history, their understanding of the cosmos, their moral codes, and their encounters with the profound and the unexplained. For centuries, we have viewed these stories as simple fables, as primitive attempts to explain natural phenomena like lightning or the changing of the seasons. But what if, buried deep within these ancient stories from every single culture on Earth, there is a consistent, recurring, and literal memory of our silent celestial observers? What if the gods who descended from the heavens in fiery chariots, who possessed magical powers, and who taught humanity the basics of civilization were not gods at all? What if they were the zookeepers, making a rare and perhaps accidental appearance, their advanced technology being interpreted by our primitive ancestors as a form of divine power? We find one of the most detailed and technologically specific of these accounts in the ancient Sanskrit epics of India, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. These texts, which are thousands of years old, describe in meticulous and almost engineering-like detail a class of flying machines known as the Vimanas. They are described as multi-tiered, circular or cylindrical craft, capable of flying with the speed of the wind and giving out a melodious sound. The texts describe them being able to travel not just through the air, but underwater, and even into outer space. They are described as possessing terrible weapons, weapons that sound hauntingly and disturbingly similar to our own modern instruments of war. The texts speak of a single projectile charged with all the power of the universe, which created an incandescent column of smoke and flame as bright as 1,000 suns, an explosion that could kill armies and poison the land for generations. Are these just the products of a rich and powerful poetic imagination, or are they the distorted but fundamentally accurate mythological descriptions of real advanced technology that our ancient ancestors witnessed with their own eyes? This pattern of describing advanced technology in divine or mythological terms is not limited to ancient India. In the biblical book of Ezekiel, the prophet describes a profound and deeply strange vision. He sees a whirlwind coming from the north, a great cloud with fire unfolding itself, and from the midst of this fire he sees the likeness of 4 living creatures. He then describes, in great and confusing detail, a set of impossible wheels, a wheel within a wheel, that are covered in eyes and that move in perfect unison with the creatures. For millennia, this has been interpreted as a profound but ultimately metaphorical divine vision. But in the 1970s, a NASA engineer named Joseph F. Blumrich, an expert in the structural design of spacecraft like the Saturn V rocket, analyzed Ezekiel's description from a purely engineering perspective. He concluded that the prophet was not describing a metaphor. He was providing a surprisingly accurate and meticulous, if pre-scientific, description of a technological landing craft, with the wheels being a form of omnidirectional landing gear, or rotors. In the context of the zoo hypothesis, Ezekiel's vision could be interpreted as a rare, accidental, and terrifyingly close-up sighting of one of the zookeeper's research drones, a non-interactive observation that went wrong. To understand how our ancestors might have reacted to such an encounter, we do not need to speculate. We have a powerful, modern, and real-world analogy: the phenomenon of the cargo cults of Melanesia. After the Second World War, remote and uncontacted tribes on islands in the Pacific who had never seen advanced technology were suddenly visited by American military cargo planes. These great, noisy silver birds would descend from the heavens, and from their bellies would emerge strange, pale-skinned men who brought with them unimaginable treasures. canned food, steel tools, medicine, and textiles. The islanders saw this as a miracle. When the war ended and the planes stopped coming, these tribes began to worship the planes and the men who flew them as gods. They built perfect, life-size replicas of the cargo planes out of bamboo and straw. They carved mock runways into their jungles, and they began to perform elaborate rituals, mimicking the actions of the air traffic controllers they had seen, in the desperate and fervent hope that their religious devotion would persuade the cargo gods to return from the heavens. This is a perfect and deeply humbling illustration of how a primitive culture interprets a technology that is so advanced it appears to be magical, and it forces us to ask a profound question. Is it possible that our own ancient ancestors were a global cargo cult? Did they witness the zookeeper's technology, interpret it as divine, and then encode their experiences into the very fabric of the religious and mythological systems that have been passed down in a more and more distorted form to us today? The echoes of these potential encounters are not just found in our stories. They may be carved into our most ancient art and artifacts. Across the globe, we find strange and unsettling depictions and objects that seem to be profoundly out of place. In the ancient Egyptian temple of Dendera, a stone relief depicts figures holding what looks to a modern eye exactly like a giant light bulb, complete with a filament and a cable connecting it to a power source. In a tomb in Saqqara, archaeologists found a small wooden object, the Saqqara bird, that is shaped with almost perfect aerodynamic precision, like a modern glider. And in the ancient 6,000-year-old cave paintings of Tassili N'Nir, in the Sahara Desert, we find strange humanoid figures with round heads that look exactly like helmets, and bodies that seem to be clad in bulky, spacesuit-like garments. The mainstream archaeological explanation, of course, is that we are simply projecting our own modern technological interpretations onto these ancient symbolic and mythological images. The Dendera light is a lotus flower with a snake inside it. The Saqqara bird is a child's toy, and the Tassili figures are just masked ritual dancers. But the ancient theorist is forced to ask a different question. What if they are exactly what they look like? What if our ancestors were not just imagining gods and monsters? What if they were simply and accurately drawing the strange, non-human beings and the incomprehensible technology that they saw in their skies? The myths, the art, and the sacred texts of our most ancient ancestors from every corner of the globe are filled with these strange, persistent, and unsettling echoes. Stories of gods who descended from the sky, of flying machines that waged war in the heavens, and of impossible technologies that were given to and then taken away from humanity. Are these just the products of a universal human imagination, a strange and unexplained coincidence of mythology across thousands of disconnected cultures, or are they a real, if deeply distorted, and almost completely forgotten historical record of humanity's long and silent observation of our celestial zookeepers? The clues are ambiguous, forever shrouded in the deep mists of time. But this leads us to an even more disturbing and far more intimate possibility. What if the zookeepers were not just content to watch from afar? What if, from time to time, they have directly and deliberately interfered in our development, subtly guiding our evolution for their own unknowable purposes? The search for evidence now takes a turn into the most controversial and most personal territory of all, the possibility that our very DNA, the biological blueprint of what it means to be human, is not entirely our own. The myths, the art, and the sacred texts of our most ancient ancestors from every corner of the globe are filled with strange, persistent, and unsettling echoes. They are a chorus of stories, all singing a similar song of gods who descended from the sky, of flying machines that waged war in the heavens, and of impossible technologies that were given to and then taken away from a primitive humanity. For centuries, we have dismissed these as the products of a universal human imagination, a coincidental and poetic way of understanding a frightening world. But in the context of the zoo hypothesis, we are forced to consider a more literal and far more disturbing interpretation, that these stories are a real, if deeply distorted, and almost completely forgotten historical record of humanity's long and silent observation of our celestial zookeepers. This, however, leads us to an even more profound and far more intimate possibility. What if the zookeepers were not just content to watch from afar? What if, from time to time, they have directly and deliberately interfered in our development, subtly guiding our evolution for their own unknowable purposes? The search for evidence now takes a turn into the most controversial and most personal territory of all: the possibility that our very DNA, the biological blueprint of what it means to be human, is not entirely our own. To understand why such a radical idea is even considered, we must first confront the profound and still unsolved mystery of our own origins. For 6 million years, our hominid ancestors walked the earth, their evolution a slow, gradual, and predictable story of small, incremental changes. They learned to walk upright, they learned to use simple tools, their brains grew slowly larger. But then, in a geological instant, somewhere between 200,000 and 50,000 years ago, something extraordinary and explosive happened, a phenomenon that anthropologists call the Great Leap Forward. Suddenly, and with a speed that defies the normal slow pace of Darwinian evolution, our species, Homo sapiens, appeared on the world stage, and we were profoundly different. The archaeological record shows the sudden, almost instantaneous emergence of complex, symbolic language, of sophisticated and beautiful art, of religious belief, and of complex, multi-part tools. At the heart of this revolution was the human brain itself, which had, over a relatively short evolutionary period, tripled in size. An organ so complex and so energetically expensive that its rapid development remains one of the greatest puzzles in all of biology. Something, or someone, appears to have lit a fire behind our eyes. This great unexplained leap in our cognitive and creative abilities has led some researchers to look for the evidence of this sudden change not in the fossil record, but in the genetic record. The Human Genome Project, one of the greatest scientific achievements of our time, has given us the ability to read the 3 billion letter instruction book of our own species. And within that vast complex code, we have found profound mysteries. For decades, scientists were baffled by the fact that over 95% of our DNA did not seem to code for proteins, the building blocks of our bodies. It was dismissed as junk DNA, the leftover meaningless detritus of our long evolutionary history. We now know that much of this junk has crucial regulatory functions. But vast continent-sized stretches of our genome remain a complete and total mystery. It is in this genetic dark matter that proponents of an alien intervention believe we might one day find the smoking gun, a message, a signature, a pattern of code so complex, so mathematical, and so clearly artificial that it could not possibly be the result of random mutation and natural selection. It would be the ultimate alien fact, a creator's calling card, buried deep within every single cell of our bodies. This idea has been given a more specific and formal name, the uplifting hypothesis. It proposes that our pre-human ancestors, perhaps a species like Homo erectus, were deliberately and artificially genetically modified by our celestial zookeepers. In this scenario, the aliens, in their long and patient observation of our world, saw a promising but ultimately limited species, an animal that had the potential for greatness, but which was perhaps stuck in an evolutionary rut, and so they decided to intervene. to reach down and give that species the final crucial push it needed to achieve true self-aware and creative consciousness. This would not have required a grand magical act of creation. It could have been a subtle, precise, and almost surgical act of genetic engineering, the fusing of two ape chromosomes to create the unique human chromosome 2, an event that dramatically set us apart from our primate cousins. The activation of a handful of dormant genes that controlled brain size and neural connectivity, a small, almost invisible change that would, over the next few thousand generations, completely and irrevocably alter the destiny of our species and the future of this planet. In this strange and unsettling light, our most ancient and sacred myths from around the world suddenly take on a new and far more literal meaning. The stories of gods who descended from the heavens and created mankind in their own image. The myths of the Anunnaki, the Sumerian gods who were said to have created humanity as a race of servants to mine gold. The biblical story of the Nephilim, the sons of God who came down to earth and interbred with the daughters of men, creating a new lineage of heroes. Are these just religious fables, or are they the distorted, mythological, and cargo cult-like memories of a real, physical, and technological event? The memory of a genetic engineering project, a moment when our silent observers broke their own rule of non-interference and gave us the gift, or perhaps the curse, of higher consciousness. Our very sense of divine creation, in this view, is a faded, misunderstood memory of a laboratory experiment. A final, strange, and counterintuitive line of evidence for this hypothesis may lie not in our strengths, but in our profound biological flaws. For a species that is supposedly the pinnacle of evolution, humanity is a remarkably fragile and poorly adapted creature. We are beset by hundreds of genetic diseases. Our transition to walking upright has left us with a chronic susceptibility to back problems. Our jaws have shrunk faster than our teeth, leading to the painful and often dangerous problem of impacted wisdom teeth. We are born in a state of almost complete helplessness, and we are remarkably ill-suited to the natural environment of our own planet without the aid of our technology. The uplifting hypothesis offers a potential explanation for this. Natural Darwinian evolution is a slow, messy, and incremental process, but it produces creatures that are exquisitely well adapted to their specific environments. A sudden, artificial, and perhaps even rushed act of genetic engineering, however, might be different. It could succeed in its primary goal to create a larger and more complex brain, but it might also create a host of unintended and detrimental side effects. Our flaws in this view are the signatures of an imperfect engineering job. They are the buggy lines of code, the unintended consequences of an ancient and hurried genetic upgrade, the staggering possibility that our own DNA is an ancient and perhaps flawed artifact, that our intelligence and our consciousness are not entirely our own, is the most intimate and disturbing idea we have yet confronted on this journey. It suggests that the zookeepers are not just our silent observers. They may, in fact, be our creators, our parents, our engineers, our gods, but this hypothesis, for all its explanatory power, is written in the invisible and deeply complex language of genetics, a story we are only just beginning to learn how to read. What if there is more tangible evidence of their direct interference in our ancient past? Evidence that is not written in our genes but in the very ground beneath our feet, and in the stones that our own ancestors have lifted. The search for the zookeeper's hand now takes us to the world's most enigmatic and impossible ancient structures, to megalithic sites that were built with a precision and on a scale that seemed to defy the capabilities of our Stone Age ancestors. And it forces us to ask a new and deeply troubling question. Did we build these alone? The staggering and deeply intimate possibility that our own DNA is an ancient and perhaps engineered artifact, that our intelligence and consciousness are not entirely our own, is the most profound and unsettling idea we have yet confronted. It suggests that the celestial zookeepers we have been speculating about are not just our silent observers. They may, in fact, be our creators, our parents, our engineers, our gods. But this hypothesis, for all its explanatory power, is written in the invisible and deeply complex language of genetics, a story we are only just beginning to learn how to read. What if, however, there is more tangible, more physical, and more enduring evidence of their direct interference in our ancient past? Evidence that is not written in the fragile code of our genes, but in the very ground beneath our feet and in the colossal, impossible stones that our own ancestors have somehow lifted. The search for the zookeeper's hand now takes us to the world's most enigmatic and impossible ancient structures, to megalithic sites that were built with a precision and on a scale that seemed to defy the capabilities of our Stone Age ancestors. And it forces us to ask a new and deeply troubling question. Did we build these alone? Our journey takes us high into the desolate, wind-swept altiplano of modern-day Bolivia, to the ruins of a site known as Pumapunku. At an altitude of 13,000 feet, this site is a chaotic field of massive, shattered stone blocks, the remains of a temple complex that archaeologists attribute to the ancient Tiwanaku culture. But the stones of Pumapunku are unlike any other ancient stonework on the face of the earth. The blocks are made of diorite and andesite, two of the hardest and most difficult to work stones on the planet, second only to diamond in their durability. And yet these impossibly hard stones have been cut with a precision that seems to defy the technological capabilities of any ancient culture. The blocks have perfectly straight edges, flawless right angles, and surfaces that are polished to a glass-like smoothness. Most famously, the site is littered with what are known as H-blocks, massive stones with complex interlocking shapes and intricate interior and exterior corners that look as if they were created by a sophisticated milling machine, not by simple stone and bronze tools. Some of these blocks have rows of small, evenly spaced holes drilled into them, and thin, perfectly uniform grooves cut deep into their surfaces. Features that look to any modern engineer as if they were made to be assembled with metal clamps or to be part of a much larger, more complex machine. This mystery of precision is compounded by the mystery of scale. The blocks weigh many tons, with the largest weighing over 130 tons. The quarries from which they were cut are located miles away across a rugged, high-altitude landscape, with no beasts of burden, no wheels, and no trees for wooden rollers. The logistical mystery of how these colossal, perfectly cut stones were transported and then assembled remains one of the greatest and most profound enigmas in all of archaeology. This theme of impossible, megalithic construction is not limited to the high Andes. Half a world away in modern-day Lebanon lie the ruins of the Roman Temple of Jupiter at Baalbek, but beneath the familiar Roman architecture lies a foundation, a grand podium, that is far older and far more massive. This foundation is built, in part, with three of the largest worked stones on the entire planet, a formation known as the Trilithon. Each of these three perfectly cut limestone blocks weighs an estimated 800 tons. To put this into perspective, that is the equivalent of 3 Boeing 747 jumbo jets, carved from solid rock and lifted into place in a perfectly level course, high up on a retaining wall. But even these are not the largest stones at the site. A short distance away, still lying in the ancient quarry, is a fourth, even larger block, known as the Stone of the Pregnant Woman. This colossal, perfectly cut monolith weighs an almost unbelievable 1,200 tons. Our most powerful, modern mobile cranes would be stretched to their absolute limits to even begin to lift such an object. The question of how an ancient people, whether the Romans or some much older forgotten civilization, managed to quarry, transport, and then lift these colossal stones into place with such precision is a mystery that has never been satisfactorily answered. The ancient astronaut theory proposes a simple, if terrifying, solution: that they did not. The theory suggests that the Romans simply built their own smaller temple, on top of a much more ancient and far more massive megalithic foundation that had been there for thousands of years before them. The work of a civilization with a technology that was, in some ways, superior to our own. This pattern of impossible megalithic stonework is found again in the mountains of Peru, at sites like Cusco and the magnificent fortress of Sacsayhuaman. Here the mystery is not just one of scale, but of almost supernatural precision and artistry. The walls of these ancient Inca sites are built from massive multi-ton and irregularly shaped polygonal stones. But these stones are fitted together so perfectly without a single drop of mortar that a single sheet of paper or even a razor blade cannot be inserted between them. Each stone, some with as many as 12 or 13 different angles, has been cut to match the complex interlocking shapes of its neighbors with a degree of precision that is, even today, almost impossible to replicate. The question is a profound one. How did the ancient builders, with their simple tools, manage to carve these multi-ton, irregular blocks with such perfect three-dimensional accuracy? And how did they then lift these colossal puzzle piece stones into place, fitting them together so perfectly that the structures have remained standing through centuries of powerful earthquakes that have leveled the modern buildings all around them? The local legends of the Inca say that the stones were not cut and lifted by human hands at all. They say that the gods or beings from the sky used a special tool, a liquid that could be painted onto the rock to make it soft and malleable, or that they used the power of sound to levitate the great stones into place. Are these just myths? Or are they a faded, cultural memory of a real lost technology? A technology that was given to, or perhaps simply witnessed by our ancient ancestors, the technology of the celestial zookeepers. No discussion of impossible ancient structures would be complete without considering the greatest and most enigmatic of them all, the Great Pyramid of Giza. We have been taught to see it as a simple tomb, a monument of brute force built by tens of thousands of slaves over decades. But a closer look at its construction and its placement reveals a level of sophistication and precision that seems to defy this simple explanation. The pyramid is composed of 2.5 million blocks of stone, some weighing up to 80 tons, all of them cut and placed with a jeweler's precision. Its base is almost a perfect square, level to within a fraction of an inch, and its four sides are aligned to the four cardinal directions of the compass, with an accuracy that would be a challenge for modern architects to replicate. But the true mystery of the Great Pyramid may lie not in its construction but in its mathematics and its location. Its dimensions appear to encode, with a high degree of accuracy, fundamental mathematical constants like pi and the golden ratio phi, and its placement on the Earth is extraordinary. It sits at, or extremely close to, the exact geographical center of the Earth's landmass, and at the intersection of the longest lines of latitude and longitude that cross over land. Is this all just a series of incredible, mind-bending coincidences, the result of our own pattern-seeking minds finding meaning where there is none? Or is the Great Pyramid not just a tomb, but a message, a time capsule, a geodetic marker, a piece of planetary engineering left behind by a civilization that possessed a profound and supposedly impossible understanding of global mathematics, geodesy, and astronomy? The impossible stone structures of our ancient past stand as silent, enigmatic, and deeply challenging monuments. They are a profound and uncomfortable anomaly in our conventional understanding of human history, whispering of a lost technology, a forgotten golden age of genius, or the possibility of a direct and physical intervention from an outside and perhaps non-human intelligence. The evidence is ambiguous, a grand and beautiful puzzle of stone and silence. But what if the greatest and most enduring evidence for an ancient, advanced civilization is not written in stone at all? What if it is written on a planetary scale in the very stars themselves? The search for the hand of our predecessors now takes us to the world's most ancient and mysterious astronomical alignments, to forgotten calendars and cosmic clocks that suggest our ancestors possessed a deep, complex, and supposedly impossible knowledge of the heavens, a knowledge that, by all rights, they should not have had. The impossible stone structures of our ancient past stand as silent, enigmatic, and deeply challenging monuments. They are a profound and uncomfortable anomaly in our conventional understanding of history, whispering of a lost technology, a forgotten age of genius, or the possibility of a direct and physical intervention from an outside and perhaps non-human intelligence. The evidence is ambiguous, a grand and beautiful puzzle of stone and silence. But what if the greatest and most enduring evidence for an ancient, advanced civilization, or for the guiding hand of our celestial zookeepers, is not written in stone at all? What if it is written on a planetary scale in the very stars themselves? The search for the hand of our predecessors now takes us from the megalithic mysteries on the ground to the world's most ancient and mysterious astronomical alignments, to forgotten calendars and cosmic clocks that suggest our ancestors possessed a deep, complex, and supposedly impossible knowledge of the heavens, a knowledge that, by all rights, they should not have had. Our journey must begin at the most revolutionary archaeological site on the planet, Göbekli Tepe, in modern-day Turkey, discovered only a few decades ago. This site has completely and irrevocably shattered our understanding of the ancient world. It is a massive, sophisticated temple complex, built with rings of huge T-shaped megalithic pillars, some weighing up to 20 tons, all of them elaborately and beautifully carved with stylized depictions of animals. But the truly shocking fact about Göbekli Tepe is its age. Radiocarbon dating has placed its construction at an almost unbelievable 9,600 years before Christ. That is nearly 12,000 years ago. This makes it 7,000 years older than the Great Pyramid of Giza and 6,000 years older than Stonehenge. It was built in a time when mainstream archaeology has always taught us that humanity was nothing more than a collection of simple, primitive, hunter-gatherer tribes. Yet here we have evidence of a society that was capable of organizing a massive workforce, of quarrying and moving multi-ton stones, of creating breathtaking art, and, as recent research has discovered, of practicing a highly sophisticated form of astronomy. The central pillars of its main enclosures are aligned with a remarkable precision to the cardinal directions, and other alignments appear to mark the rising and setting points of specific important stars, most notably the star Sirius. The site appears to have been a vast and complex astronomical observatory, a place to watch the heavens, built by a supposedly primitive people 6,000 years before the invention of writing. But the most profound astronomical mystery encoded in the monuments of the ancient world is not the alignment to a single star, but the knowledge of a vast, slow, and almost imperceptible cosmic cycle, the precession of the equinoxes. This is the slow 26,000-year wobble of the Earth's axis, a motion like that of a spinning top as it begins to slow down. This wobble causes the entire canopy of the stars to appear to drift slowly backwards at a rate of only 1 degree every 72 years. To discover and to measure this incredibly subtle motion would require a civilization to make continuous, precise, and meticulously recorded astronomical observations for many hundreds, if not thousands of years. Mainstream history tells us that this discovery was first made by the Greek astronomer Hipparchus in the 2nd century before Christ, and yet all across the ancient world in cultures that are thousands of years older than the Greeks, we find what appears to be a deep and sophisticated understanding of this great cycle. The dimensions of the Great Pyramid of Giza, the layout of the temples at Angkor Wat, the myths of the ancient Egyptians and the Sumerians, all seem to contain complex mathematical and symbolic references to the number 25,920, the length of the precessional cycle. Where did this impossible, ancient knowledge come from? To know of precession is not just to be a casual stargazer. It is to be a master of a long-term, scientific, and observational project that should have been completely impossible for any ancient civilization that we currently know of. This mystery of impossible, ancient astronomical knowledge is nowhere more profound or more inexplicable than in the sacred traditions of the Dogon people of Mali, in West Africa. In the 1930s, French anthropologists who had lived with the tribe for decades were finally initiated into their most secret and sacred cosmological knowledge, a story that the Dogon claimed had been handed down, unchanged, for thousands of years. The tribe told the anthropologists that their entire civilization had originated from the star system of Sirius. They described Sirius, the brightest star in our sky, as a binary system, with a second companion star. They said that this companion star, which they called Potolo, was invisible to the naked eye, that it was incredibly small and incredibly heavy, and that it moved around the main star Sirius A in a long 50-year elliptical orbit. Every single one of these claims is perfectly and completely correct. But Sirius B, the companion star, is a white dwarf, a tiny collapsed star that is completely and utterly invisible without the aid of a powerful modern telescope. It was not even photographed by our own astronomers until the year 1970. How could an ancient pre-technological tribe in the heart of Africa possibly have possessed such precise, specific, and scientifically accurate information about an invisible star? Information that our own science has only confirmed in the last century. The Dogon themselves have a simple and direct explanation. They say that this knowledge was given to them thousands of years ago by their ancestors, the Namo. They describe the Namo as amphibious, non-human beings, teachers from the sky who descended to Earth in a great spinning arc that made a tremendous noise and wind, and who taught the first Dogon the secrets of the universe. In the context of the zoo hypothesis, this story takes on a chilling and literal meaning, where the Namo, a visitation from the zookeepers, a rare and perhaps unauthorized moment of contact, where a small piece of a much greater galactic knowledge was deliberately or perhaps accidentally left behind, are the strange and impossible astronomical alignments of the ancient world and the profound pre-scientific knowledge of cosmic cycles, the faded, mythological echoes of a time when our celestial observers broke their own rule of non-interference and decided to teach the promising young animals in their cosmic zoo how to read the stars. This pattern of impossible astronomical knowledge is a global phenomenon. It is found in the breathtaking precision of the Mayan calendar, which calculated the length of the year with an accuracy that was not surpassed in Europe until the 20th century. It is found in the great sun-drenched plazas of Chaco Canyon, which are aligned to the complex 18.6-year lunar standstill cycle. It is found in the very layout of the 3 Great Pyramids of Giza, which seem to mirror with an uncanny precision the layout and the brightness of the 3 stars in Orion's belt. These are not a series of isolated lucky guesses. They appear to be the scattered, fragmented pieces of a single, global, and incredibly ancient system of scientific knowledge, a legacy of the gods. a lost scientific tradition that may have been handed down from a much older and perhaps a completely non-human source. The zookeepers, in this view, may not have just been watching us. They may have been our first and most forgotten teachers, leaving behind a celestial map and a cosmic clock for their chosen subjects to one day rediscover and perhaps to finally understand. The impossible astronomical knowledge of our ancient ancestors presents us with a profound and deeply unsettling choice. We are forced to believe that countless disconnected and supposedly primitive cultures, all by sheer mind-boggling coincidence, just happen to discover the same subtle 26,000-year cosmic cycle and the existence of the same invisible stars. Or we are forced to believe that they were all the inheritors of a single, forgotten, and perhaps extraterrestrial legacy of knowledge. The evidence, whether it is written in stone or written in the stars, suggests that we are a species with a profound and almost complete amnesia, a species that is haunted by the ghosts of a past that we do not understand. But this leads to the ultimate and most personal question. If we have been watched and perhaps even subtly guided by a silent outside intelligence, what is their ultimate purpose? What is the final endgame of this grand cosmic experiment? The search for an answer now takes us from the ancient past to the speculative future, from the evidence of their actions to the implications of their motives, as we explore the most profound and most disturbing question of all. What do the zookeepers want with us? The impossible astronomical knowledge of our ancient ancestors presents us with a profound and deeply unsettling choice. We are forced to believe that countless, disconnected, and supposedly primitive cultures, all by a sheer mind-boggling coincidence, just happen to discover the same subtle 26,000-year cosmic cycle and the existence of the same invisible stars. Or we are forced to believe that they were all the inheritors of a single, forgotten, and perhaps extraterrestrial legacy of knowledge. The evidence, whether it is written in stone or written in the stars, suggests that we are a species with a profound and almost complete amnesia, a species that is haunted by the ghosts of a past that we do not understand. But this leads to the ultimate and most personal question of all. If we have been watched and perhaps even subtly guided by a silent, outside intelligence, what is their ultimate purpose? What is the final endgame of this grand, cosmic experiment? The search for an answer now takes us from the ancient past to the speculative future, from the evidence of their actions to the implications of their motives, as we explore the most profound and most disturbing question of all. What do the zookeepers want with us? The most optimistic, and perhaps most comforting interpretation of the zoo hypothesis is that our celestial observers are benevolent. In this view, they are not zookeepers in the sense of imprisoning us, but are more like cosmic gardeners. They may see life, and particularly intelligent life, as the most rare, precious, and beautiful phenomenon in the entire universe, and they may have taken it upon themselves as a form of sacred and ancient duty to nurture and protect it wherever it arises. Our planet is not a cage, it is a garden, a cosmic nursery, and the zookeepers are the silent, patient guardians watching over their creation. Their policy of non-interference would be an act of profound wisdom and compassion. They would understand that to reveal themselves to a young, developing civilization would be to irrevocably alter its natural course, to destroy its culture, and to shatter its sense of self. The occasional, subtle nudges we have speculated about, the potential genetic upgrade, the gift of astronomical knowledge, would not be acts of control, but acts of assistance. A gentle hand helping a promising species over a difficult evolutionary hurdle. The ultimate goal of these benevolent gardeners would be to watch us grow, to see us solve our own problems, and to wait for the day when we of our own accord achieve a level of technological and spiritual maturity that would allow us to join them as equals in a peaceful galactic community. The fear in this scenario is a gentle one. It is the fear of our own cosmic childhood, the unsettling realization that our greatest achievements may not have been entirely our own, and that we have been living under the watchful and perhaps paternalistic gaze of our elders this entire time. A colder, more dispassionate, and perhaps more realistic motivation for their long and silent watch might be one of pure and dispassionate scientific inquiry. We must imagine a civilization that is billions of years old. A society so advanced that it has already answered all the simple questions about the universe. They have mapped the cosmos. They have unified the forces of nature. They have mastered energy and matter. For such a civilization, there may be only one great unsolved mystery left: the phenomenon of consciousness itself. They may understand the how of the universe, but not yet the why. Our planet, then, becomes their ultimate experiment, a world where life was allowed to arise naturally, and where intelligence and consciousness have been allowed to evolve without any outside interference. We are, in the most literal sense, the subjects in their grandest and longest-running scientific study. Their silent, non-interactive observation is a strict adherence to the scientific method. To contaminate the experiment would be to render its results meaningless. Our entire history, from the first spark of life to the present day, is a single precious data point in their quest to understand the nature of the mind. The horror of this idea is one of profound and utter objectification. Our greatest joys, our deepest sorrows, our most brutal wars, our most sublime works of art, all of our history is to them completely without meaning or moral value. It is just data. We are, in this scenario, the most interesting bacteria in the most important petri dish in the galaxy. There is another more melancholy and strangely noble potential motive that connects directly to the great filter. What if the zookeepers are not a vast, thriving galactic club, but are instead themselves the lonely, isolated survivors of their own ancient great filter? We can imagine a civilization that arose billions of years ago, achieved a level of technology that we can barely dream of, and then, in a moment of crisis, almost annihilated itself. They survived, but they were forever scarred by the experience, and they were left with a profound and terrible question. Are we the only ones who made it? In this scenario, their long and silent watch over the Earth and countless other worlds like it is a melancholy and almost desperate search for others. They are not zookeepers. They are cosmic archivists, galactic archaeologists, sifting through the ruins of a silent universe, looking for clues. They are studying us to understand the different ways a young civilization might face its own filter. They are looking for patterns, for warning signs, for any hint that might help them understand why the universe is so tragically empty. The UFP probes are not instruments of control. They are scientific instruments, taking the measure of our technological ascent, and perhaps our slow descent towards our own unique filter. The silence, for them, is not a choice. It is a profound and tragic reality that they are trying to solve, and we are their most promising and perhaps their most heartbreaking new piece of data. But we must also consider the more pragmatic, more cynical, and far more menacing possibilities. The zookeepers may not be interested in our culture, our science, or our survival at all. They may be interested in our real estate. The Earth is an incredibly rare and valuable object, a stable, water-rich planet with a complex, self-sustaining biosphere located in a quiet, safe region of the galaxy. Such worlds may be the ultimate prize, the most valuable and most contested resource in the entire cosmos. In this dark and deeply unsettling scenario, The quarantine is not to protect us, it is to protect the planet from us. The zookeepers are cosmic landlords, patiently waiting for the current, noisy, and destructive tenants to either wipe themselves out or to evolve into a species that can be safely and cleanly evicted. Our entire civilization is just a temporary, and perhaps annoying pestilent infestation that must be dealt with before they can finally move in and claim the prize for their own purposes. They are not watching us with compassion or scientific curiosity. They are watching us in the same way a farmer watches a field of pests, waiting for the right moment to begin the harvest. The unknowable motives of our potential observers, from benevolent gardeners to cosmic landlords, leave us in a state of profound and inescapable uncertainty. We are characters in a story whose plot we cannot discern, written by an author we can never hope to meet. But all of these hypotheses, from the most hopeful to the most terrifying, share one common and deeply humbling feature: a vast and almost unimaginable gulf in power, in knowledge, and in age between them and us. This raises the final and most practical question of all. What happens if the quarantine, for whatever reason, is finally lifted? What is the protocol for first contact? And what would the sudden, undeniable, and world-shattering revelation of their existence, regardless of their motives, actually do to our own fragile and volatile civilization? We must now explore the potential consequences of the zookeepers for good or for ill, finally deciding to open the cage. The unknowable motives of our potential celestial observers, from benevolent cosmic gardeners to cold, dispassionate scientists, or even cynical cosmic landlords, leave us in a state of profound and inescapable uncertainty. We are, it seems, characters in a grand cosmic story, whose plot we cannot discern, written by an author we can never hope to meet. But all of these speculative hypotheses, from the most hopeful to the most terrifying, share one common and deeply humbling feature: a vast and almost unimaginable gulf in power, in knowledge, and in age between them and us. This realization raises the final and most practical question of all: what would happen to our own fragile and volatile civilization if the quarantine, for whatever reason, were to be finally and irrevocably lifted? What is the protocol for a true first contact? And what would the sudden, undeniable, and world-shattering revelation of their existence, regardless of their motives, actually do to us? We must now explore the potential consequences of the zookeepers, for good or for ill, finally deciding to open the cage. For the entirety of our species' history, we have operated under a single, foundational, and unspoken assumption: that we are alone, and that we are the sole masters of our own destiny. This belief in our own sovereignty is the bedrock of our religions, our political systems, our economies, and our very sense of self. The sudden, unambiguous revelation of a vastly superior and unimaginably ancient extraterrestrial intelligence would not just be another scientific discovery. It would be a planetary-scale psychological event, a species-level paradigm shift so profound that it would instantly shatter the very foundations of human civilization. It would be the end of our cosmic childhood. The moment of contact would be the single most transformative and most dangerous event in all of human history, an event that would dwarf every scientific revolution, every religious revelation, and every political upheaval that has ever come before. The world before that moment, and the world after, would be two completely different and unrecognizable places. The immediate and almost certain consequence of such a revelation would be a period of profound and uncontrollable social and political chaos. The existing power structures of our world, our national governments, our international institutions would be instantly rendered impotent and irrelevant. The sudden appearance of a galactic-level power would make the squabbles of our own nation seem like the arguments of children in a sandbox. Our global markets, which are built on a fragile foundation of predictable stability, would likely collapse in the face of such profound and total uncertainty. The public reaction would be a global tidal wave of every conceivable emotion. There would be awe, there would be wonder, there would be religious ecstasy, and there would be abject primal terror. Some portion of the population would almost certainly welcome the visitors as saviors, as gods, as the answer to all of our problems, while another, equally significant portion would see them as a demonic threat, as invaders, as the literal end of the world. New cults and new religions would spring up overnight, and our already fractured global society would likely shatter into countless competing factions, each with its own violent and irreconcilable interpretation of what the Great Revelation meant. The crisis for our established belief systems would be just as profound and just as destructive. For the great religions of the world, which have for millennia provided a sense of meaning and order for billions of people, the revelation would be a challenge of almost insurmountable proportions. Do their sacred texts written thousands of years ago account for this? Are these alien beings part of the divine plan, or are they a force that exists completely outside of it? Are they angels, or are they demons? Deep, violent, and permanent schisms would tear through every major faith on the planet. For our secular scientific worldview, the crisis would be just as severe. The discovery of a vastly superior and ancient intelligence would be a humbling and perhaps deeply demoralizing blow to our humanistic pride. It would instantly render much of our own hard-won science obsolete and incomplete, and it would force us to confront the deeply uncomfortable fact that we are not, and have never been, the pinnacle of cosmic evolution or the universe's great standard of intelligence. Even if the intentions of our visitors were entirely peaceful, the mere existence of their technology and our knowledge of it would be a transformative and deeply dangerous force. If they possess the secret to clean, limitless energy, what happens to our entire global economy, which is built on the foundation of scarce and polluting fossil fuels? If they have cured all disease and have mastered the science of aging, what happens to our medical and pharmaceutical industries, and what happens to our social structures when faced with the possibility of near immortality? The likely outcome would be a cargo cult effect on a global scale. We would almost certainly abandon our own slow and difficult path of scientific discovery in a desperate and all-consuming attempt to acquire, to mimic, or to steal their technology. Our own innovation would stagnate, and we would become a planet of supplicants, a primitive culture begging for the magical cargo of a superior civilization, a culture that would have lost its own sense of purpose and its own drive to explore. It is for this very reason, this almost certain outcome of social, political, and spiritual collapse, that many theorists believe that first contact itself may be the final and most insurmountable great filter. The inability of a young, divided, emotionally volatile, and technologically adolescent species like humanity to peacefully and rationally handle the psychological and social shock of the revelation is what ultimately dooms us. The zookeepers may be keeping their distance from us, not just to protect our natural development, but because they know from their own long history and perhaps from observing countless other failed civilizations that the very act of revealing themselves to a species at our specific stage of development is in itself a death sentence. We would, with an almost perfect certainty, tear ourselves apart in the chaos, the fear, and the conflict that would follow. The quarantine, in this view, is not a punishment. It is a necessary and perhaps profound act of mercy, an attempt to prevent us from failing the final, terrible, and most difficult test of all. The potential consequences of an open, direct, and unambiguous contact with a superior intelligence are so catastrophic, so existentially dangerous to the very fabric of our civilization, that it makes the zookeeper's long and persistent silence seem like a profound and necessary act of wisdom. But this all assumes that contact, if it were to happen, would be a grand, public, and global revelation, an undeniable event that no one could ignore. What if, however, it is not? What if for thousands of years the zookeepers have been engaging in a different and far more disturbing kind of contact? A quiet, a clandestine, a deeply personal, and a completely deniable interaction with select individual members of our species. The search for evidence now takes us from the fate of our civilization as a whole and into the strange, terrifying, and deeply mysterious stories of those who claim to have already been contacted. We must now explore the controversial and profoundly unsettling phenomenon of alien abduction. The potential consequences of an open, direct, and unambiguous contact with a superior intelligence are so catastrophic, so existentially dangerous to the very fabric of our civilization, that it makes the zookeeper's long and persistent silence seem like a profound and necessary act of wisdom. The quarantine, in this light, is not an act of indifference, but an act of profound and perhaps even compassionate responsibility. But this all assumes that the only form of contact is a grand, public, and global revelation, an undeniable event that no one on Earth could ignore. What if, however, it is not? What if for thousands or perhaps even hundreds of thousands of years, the zookeepers have been engaging in a different and far more disturbing kind of contact? A quiet, a clandestine, a deeply personal, and a completely deniable interaction with select individual members of our species. The search for evidence now takes us from the global to the personal, from the fate of our species as a whole to the strange, terrifying, and deeply mysterious stories of those who claim to have already been contacted. We must now explore the controversial and profoundly unsettling phenomenon of alien abduction. For decades, the idea of alien abduction has been a subject of public ridicule and scientific scorn, a modern folklore of flashing lights and little gray men. But if we peel back the layers of sensationalism and cultural caricature, we find at its core a strange, persistent, and deeply mysterious phenomenon. Tens of thousands of people from every country, every culture, and every walk of life, people with no connection to one another and often with no prior interest in the subject, have reported a strikingly and impossibly similar set of experiences. The archetypal narrative is a global constant. It often begins in a familiar, safe place, a bedroom at night, or a car on a lonely road. It is preceded by a strange, ethereal light and a feeling of profound, inexplicable dread. The witness then experiences a period of missing time, a gap in their memory that can last for hours. And then, through fragmented memories, dreams, or sometimes through hypnotic regression, a terrifying story emerges. The story of being taken, of being paralyzed and floated through solid walls and ceilings into a silent, waiting craft. The story of being in a cold, sterile, and often circular examination room, surrounded by strange, non-human beings, most commonly the tall, thin, gray entities with large black and emotionless eyes, and the story of undergoing a series of strange and often invasive medical and reproductive procedures, before being returned, unharmed but deeply traumatized, to the exact place from which they were taken, their memory of the event wiped clean, leaving behind only a lingering sense of unease and a series of strange recurring nightmares. The mainstream scientific and psychological explanation for this phenomenon is that these are not real physical events, but are instead complex and powerful manifestations of the human psyche. The most common explanation is the phenomenon of sleep paralysis, a neurological state in which a person, while falling asleep or waking up, is consciously aware but is unable to move or speak. This state is often accompanied by a strong sense of a menacing presence in the room, a crushing weight on the chest, and vivid, terrifying, and dreamlike hallucinations. This experience, which is surprisingly common, maps almost perfectly onto the initial stages of a classic abduction account. Other explanations point to false memory syndrome, particularly in the context of suggestive therapeutic techniques like hypnosis, which were used by many of the early abduction researchers and which are now known to be capable of inadvertently creating vivid, detailed, and utterly convincing, but entirely false memories. And finally, there is the powerful argument of cultural seeding, the idea that a powerful cultural narrative, created by books, television shows, and movies, has provided a ready-made template for these experiences, a story that our brains can then unconsciously project onto ambiguous psychological or neurological events, giving them a familiar if terrifying form. And yet, for all the power of these psychological explanations, there remain a series of profound and persistent anomalies that they struggle to account for. There are numerous cases of abduction events that have involved multiple, independent witnesses, such as family members in the same house who all report the same period of missing time and later, under hypnosis, recall the same details of an abduction experience. There are cases that are accompanied by strange and sometimes inexplicable physical evidence. Witnesses are sometimes left with strange surgical-looking scars, scoop marks, or triangular patterns of burns on their bodies, which appear overnight, and in some cases, small, strange, and seemingly artificial objects, implants, have been surgically removed from the bodies of alleged abductees, objects that are often made of strange meteorite-like materials and are encased in a dense biological sheath that prevents the body from rejecting them. And finally, there are the rare cases that seem to be accompanied by external, corroborating physical data, such as strange radar tracks detected by nearby military bases, or unusual electromagnetic fields and ground traces left at the location of the alleged event. While none of this constitutes definitive smoking gun proof, it suggests that the phenomenon may be far more complex and perhaps more real than a simple dismissal as dreams or fantasy would suggest. If we are to entertain the chilling possibility that these are real, physical events, then we must view them through the lens of the zoo hypothesis. This would not be contact, it would be field research. The zookeepers, in their long and patient observation of the human species, would inevitably need to gather direct physical data that cannot be obtained from a safe distance. They would need to understand our biology, our genetics, and the workings of our strange conscious minds. The abduction phenomenon, in this view, is a clandestine and ongoing scientific study. It is their version of a biologist tranquilizing a rare animal in the wild, taking blood and tissue samples, attaching a tracking collar, and then releasing it back into its natural habitat, its memory of the event a confusing and traumatic blur. The strange and recurring focus on our reproductive systems, a central and deeply disturbing theme in the abduction narrative, also finds a chillingly logical explanation in this context. The stories told by abductees are not just of simple examination, they are stories of a vast, ongoing, and clandestine genetic hybridization program, a project to create a new species that is a mix of human and alien DNA. This is the strange, consistent, and terrifying story told by thousands of alleged abductees. It is the story that the zookeepers are not just studying the animals in the zoo, they are actively and secretly breeding them. This brings the zoo hypothesis to its most personal and most terrifying possible conclusion, that the quarantine, if it exists, is not a perfect and impenetrable wall, but a porous, one-way boundary that is occasionally and secretly crossed for an unknown, and perhaps unknowable genetic purpose. This suggests that the zookeeper's interest in us is not just passive and scientific, it is active, it is genetic, and it is generational. This leads us to question the very nature of their control, and the ultimate purpose of their long and silent observation. If they are capable of such intimate, such profound, and such clandestine intervention in our lives and our very biology, it implies a level of technological and biological mastery that is, for all intents and purposes, absolute. But what if their ultimate goal is not just to study us, or to guide us, or even to create a new hybrid species? What if their final purpose, the reason for their millennia-long watch, is to prepare us for a great coming change, a cosmic event that we, in our primitive state, are not yet aware of? The search for their motives now takes us from the personal to the prophetic, as we examine the strange and recurring theme of cosmic warnings and apocalyptic prophecies in both ancient and modern accounts of contact. The deeply personal and highly controversial phenomenon of alien abduction, whether it is a product of the strange dark corners of the human psyche or a real physical interaction with a non-human intelligence, leaves us in a place of profound and unsettling uncertainty. It suggests that the great quarantine of the zoo hypothesis, if it exists, may not be a perfect and impenetrable wall, but a porous one-way boundary that is occasionally and secretly crossed for an unknown and perhaps unknowable purpose. This leads us to question the very nature of the zookeeper's control and their ultimate intentions. If they are capable of such intimate, such profound, and such clandestine intervention in our lives and our very biology, it implies a level of technological and biological mastery that is, for all intents and purposes, absolute. But what if their ultimate goal is not just to study us, or to guide us, or even to create a new hybrid species? What if their final purpose, the reason for their millennia-long watch over our fragile world, is to prepare us for a great coming change, a cosmic event that we, in our primitive state, are not yet aware of? The search for their motives now takes us from the personal to the prophetic, as we examine the strange and recurring theme of cosmic warnings and apocalyptic prophecies in both ancient and modern accounts of contact. A strange and persistent theme that runs through the modern abduction narrative. A theme that was explored in detail by respected researchers like the late Harvard psychiatrist Dr. John Mack is the consistent, recurring, and often cryptic delivery of a message. The alleged abductees from all around the world often report being shown vivid, terrifying, and hyper-realistic images of our own planet's future. They are shown visions of a world ravaged by ecological collapse, of dead, polluted oceans, of skies filled with a brown, toxic haze, and of great cities being swallowed by rising seas. They are shown visions of a global nuclear holocaust, of cities turned to glass, and of a world shrouded in the freezing darkness of a nuclear winter. These are not vague, dreamlike premonitions. They are often described as being more real than reality itself, immersive, three-dimensional projections that are designed to instill a sense of profound and urgent terror. But alongside these visions of destruction, there is often another, more enigmatic message, a message of hope, a prophecy of a coming shift in human consciousness, a great spiritual awakening that will, if we choose it, allow us to navigate the coming crises and to take our place in a larger cosmic community. And the alleged purpose of the strange genetic hybridization program in this context is revealed: to create a new, more resilient, and perhaps more consciously evolved species, a species that can survive the coming cataclysm and carry the torch of consciousness forward, even if our own current version of humanity does not. What makes these modern technological prophecies so deeply unsettling is how perfectly they echo the eschatological myths of our most ancient and disconnected cultures. Long before the invention of nuclear weapons or the scientific understanding of climate change, Our ancestors were telling the exact same stories. The Norse myths tell of Ragnarok, a final, world-ending battle, a great winter and a fire that consumes the world, after which a new, green, and peaceful world is born, populated by a handful of survivors. The Hindu scriptures describe a great cycle of ages, the yugas, culminating in our current age, the Kali Yuga, a period of darkness, conflict, and spiritual decline that will end in a great cleansing, after which a new golden age will begin. The prophecies of the ancient Hopi people of North America speak of a series of worlds and of a coming great purification, a time of fire and catastrophe that will cleanse the earth and make way for the fifth world. And the apocalyptic visions of the biblical book of Revelation describe a final judgment, a period of plagues, wars, and ecological disasters that will ultimately lead to a new heaven and a new earth. Are these just universal, human archetypes? A shared psychological need to imagine endings and new beginnings? Or are they a consistent, repeated warning? A single urgent message that has been given to humanity in different forms, in different languages, and through different cultural lenses, by the same silent celestial observers, over and over and over again throughout our entire history. This idea is made even more compelling and more terrifying by the fact that these ancient mythological warnings and the modern technological visions of abductees are now being perfectly and horribly validated by our own modern mainstream science. We are at this very moment living in the very world of ecological collapse and self-inflicted catastrophe that the prophecies have warned us about for millennia. Our own climate scientists are the new prophets, and their data is the new scripture. The doomsday clock, maintained by the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, sits at just 90 seconds to midnight, the closest it has ever been, a stark scientific warning of the twin, self-inflicted threats of nuclear war and runaway climate change. But the warnings from our celestial zookeepers may not just be about the dangers we are creating for ourselves. Their ancient and long-term perspective might allow them to see a great cosmic danger that we, in our short-sightedness, are not yet aware of. Perhaps there is a future, catastrophic asteroid impact that they know is coming. Perhaps there is a nearby star that they know will go supernova, bathing our solar system in lethal radiation. Or perhaps they know that our solar system is, in its long 250 million year orbit around the galaxy, about to pass through a dense, dangerous spiral arm, a region of intense star formation and gravitational chaos. The warnings may not just be about us. They may be about a cosmic storm that is gathering on the horizon. A storm that the zookeepers know is coming and which they are trying in their own cryptic and non-interactive way to prepare us for. If these warnings are indeed real and are being delivered by a hyper-advanced external intelligence, then we must confront the final and most frustrating aspect of this entire mystery. Why are they so cryptic? Why are they so ambiguous and ineffective? Why show terrifying apocalyptic images to a handful of random, often marginalized individuals who will almost certainly be disbelieved? Why encode the warning in the obscure mythological language of ancient prophecy? If the zookeepers truly wanted to warn us, why not simply land a ship in a major city and make a clear, unambiguous, public announcement? The answer to this question may lie in the core tenet of the zoo hypothesis itself. A direct public warning would almost certainly cause a global panic, a breakdown of social order, and a wave of hysteria that could be even more destructive than the threat it was trying to warn us about. Perhaps the subtle, the myth-based, the deeply personal, and the completely deniable approach is the only way to slowly and gently seed our collective consciousness with the necessary information. A way to prepare us for a coming crisis without triggering our own worst self-destructive tendencies. The horror in this view is that we are children, being warned about a great and coming storm by adults who know that we are not yet mature enough to handle the full, terrible, and unvarnished truth. The cryptic nature of their warnings is a direct and damning reflection of their assessment of our own primitive and volatile nature. The idea that we are being subtly and repeatedly warned of our own impending doom by our silent, celestial observers is perhaps the most frightening, and at the same time, the most hopeful interpretation of the zoo hypothesis. It suggests that they are not indifferent and that they are not our enemies. It suggests that they see a future for us, a future that is in grave and imminent peril, but a future that is still worth saving. But all of these grand theories, from the zookeepers and their surveillance drones, to the ancient myths and the modern prophecies, are all in the end attempts to explain the one central, undeniable, and all-consuming fact: the Great Silence. We have been so focused on the possibility of who might be watching us and why that we have not yet considered the final and most profound possibilities. What if the quarantine is not about us at all? What if the silence is not a policy, but a fundamental law of nature? We must now explore the most fundamental and most challenging solutions to the Fermi Paradox, ideas that have nothing to do with aliens observing Earth, and everything to do with the very nature of life, intelligence, and the structure of the cosmos itself. The idea that we are being subtly and repeatedly warned of our own impending doom by our silent celestial observers is perhaps the most frightening, and at the same time, the most strangely hopeful interpretation of the zoo hypothesis. It suggests that our zookeepers are not indifferent, and that they see a future for us that is in grave and imminent peril, but a future that is still perhaps worth saving. But all of these grand speculative theories, from the zookeepers and their surveillance drones to the ancient myths and the modern prophecies, are all, in the end, attempts to explain the one central, undeniable, and all-consuming fact of our existence: the Great Silence. We have been so focused on the possibility of who might be watching us and why they might be doing so, that we have not yet considered the final and most profound possibilities. What if the quarantine we imagine is not a deliberate social policy at all? What if the silence is not a choice but a fundamental and inescapable law of nature? We must now explore the most fundamental and most challenging solutions to the Fermi Paradox, ideas that have nothing to do with aliens observing Earth, and everything to do with the very nature of life, intelligence, and the brutal structure of the cosmos itself. This leads us to the dark and powerful concept of the Great Filter, first proposed in its modern form by the economist Robin Hanson. This hypothesis is a stark and brutal answer to the universe's profound silence. It posits that on the long, arduous, and incredibly complex journey from simple, non-living matter to a sustainable, galaxy-spanning, technological civilization, there exists at least one step that is so difficult, so improbable, that it acts as a near impenetrable wall. This filter is the reason the sky is not filled with the radio chatter and the colossal engineering projects of countless alien empires. Life, the theory suggests, is consistently and predictably stopped, or filtered out, at some point along its developmental path. The entire history of life in the cosmos is a story of countless species attempting to pass through this evolutionary gauntlet. And the silence of the sky is the stark and terrible evidence that almost none of them, and perhaps none of them at all, have ever succeeded. The profound and terrifying question for humanity is, where on the long timeline of life does this great filter lie? Is it by some incredible miracle already in our past, or is it, as a growing body of evidence might suggest, waiting for us in our very near future? The hopeful, if lonely, possibility is that the filter is behind us, This would mean that one of the steps we as a species have already successfully taken was the near impossible one, perhaps the initial leap from the non-living chemistry of a primordial soup to the first simple, self-replicating cell. The spark of abiogenesis is so fantastically rare that it has only happened once, or a handful of times, in the entire history of our galaxy. Or perhaps the evolution of complex eukaryotic cells. The foundation of all animals and plants is the Great Barrier. Or perhaps the final difficult step was the emergence of human-level intelligence and consciousness itself. If any of these are true, then we are the first and perhaps the only intelligent species to have made it through the gauntlet. The fear in this scenario is not of a powerful, observing alien. The fear is of a profound, absolute, and inescapable loneliness. It would mean that the universe is a vast, sterile, and empty desert, and we are the only fragile oasis. There are no zookeepers, no ancient intelligences, no one to talk to. We are utterly and completely alone, the sole bearers of the flickering candle of consciousness in a dark and mindless cosmos. The other possibility is far darker, far more menacing, and carries with it a sense of almost certain doom. The great filter may lie ahead of us. In this horrifying scenario, life and even intelligence may be common throughout the cosmos. The universe may be filled with countless fledgling civilizations that have evolved on their own worlds, each one of them looking up at their own silent sky and wondering, just as we do, where everybody is. The reason they hear nothing is because no civilization ever survives long enough to become a truly interstellar presence. They all inevitably, predictably, and without exception, hit a final, insurmountable wall, a filter that destroys them before they can colonize other stars or leave a permanent mark on the galaxy. The Great Silence, in this view, is not the sound of an empty nursery. It is the sound of a cosmic graveyard. The reason we do not hear from anyone else is because they are all dead. The silence of the universe is the collected, silent scream of a trillion failed civilizations. If this is true, then we are forced to ask the most urgent and important question in human history. What is this final filter? And the chilling answer may be found by simply looking at the state of our own modern world. The filter is likely the discovery of a technology that is so powerful and so difficult to control that it inevitably leads to the civilization's own self-destruction. It could be the discovery of nuclear weapons, a technology that gives a young and emotionally immature species the power to annihilate itself in a flash of angry political light. It could be the unavoidable, long-term collapse of a planet's climate due to unsustainable industrial activity. Or it could be the creation of a new and even more powerful technology that we are at this very moment developing, an uncontrollable, superhuman artificial intelligence. A self-replicating nanotechnology gray goo that consumes the entire biosphere. Or a genetically engineered superplague that is immune to all of our medicines. If the filter is indeed ahead of us, then the silence in the sky is a dire and urgent warning. It is the ghostly echo of the countless civilizations that have come before us, and which have all, without exception, failed the final terrible test. The fact that we are here now with our own powerful and potentially self-destructive technologies means that we are, at this very moment, standing face to face with the Great Filter ourselves. The Great Filter, whether it lies in our lonely past or our perilous future, presents a stark and brutal explanation for the silent cosmos. It replaces the complex and almost romantic mystery of the zoo hypothesis with the simple, cold, and terrible mathematics of probability and extinction. But both of these grand ideas, the zoo and the filter, are based on one fundamental and perhaps flawed assumption: that life, once it becomes intelligent, will continue to follow a path of physical, biological, and technological expansion that is at least somewhat recognizable to us. What if this assumption is the ultimate mistake? What if the final stage of evolution is not to conquer the physical universe, or to be destroyed by it, but to abandon it entirely? The search for an answer now takes us to the most profound and most bizarre hypothesis of all: the possibility that the aliens are not silent because they are hiding, or because they are dead, but because they have uploaded themselves into a perfect digital reality, leaving our messy physical cosmos far, far behind. The Great Filter. Whether it lies in our lonely, miraculous past or in our perilous, imminent future, presents a stark and brutal explanation for the silent cosmos. It replaces the complex and almost romantic mystery of the zoo hypothesis with the simple, cold, and terrible mathematics of probability and extinction. It suggests that the universe is either an empty nursery or a vast and silent graveyard. But both of these grand ideas, the watchful zookeeper and the deadly filter, are based on one fundamental and perhaps deeply flawed human-centric assumption: that life, once it becomes intelligent, will continue to follow a path of physical, biological, and technological expansion that is at least somewhat recognizable to us. What if this assumption is the ultimate mistake? What if the final stage of conscious and technological evolution is not to conquer the physical universe, or to be destroyed by it, but to abandon it entirely? The search for an answer to the Great Silence now takes us to the most profound and most bizarre hypothesis of all: the possibility that the aliens are not silent because they are hiding from us, or because they are dead, but because they have uploaded their collective consciousnesses into a perfect digital reality, leaving our messy physical cosmos far, far behind. This is the core of the transcension hypothesis, a powerful and strangely elegant potential solution to the Fermi Paradox, first proposed in a detailed framework by the futurist John M. Smart. It posits that as any intelligent civilization becomes more and more technologically advanced, its development of computational power and its mastery of engineering at the smallest possible scales will inevitably and rapidly outpace its development of large-scale physical space travel. The universe, for all its beauty, is a vast, dangerous, and fundamentally inefficient place to live. The laws of physics, particularly the immutable and frustratingly slow speed of light, make interstellar travel and colonization a painfully slow, resource-intensive, and almost pointless endeavor. But the inner universe, the universe of pure information and simulated reality, has no such speed limit, no such physical constraints. The hypothesis suggests that any civilization will eventually reach a technological tipping point where it can create a simulated reality, a digital cosmos so rich, so detailed, and so fulfilling that it would be indistinguishable from, and in every measurable way superior to, the chaotic, unforgiving, and ultimately limited physical universe. At this point, the species would face a choice: continue the slow, hard, and dangerous slog of physical expansion into a mostly empty and hostile cosmos, or take the great inward turn, upload their collective consciousness into this digital heaven, and become immortal, godlike beings of pure information, living in a perfect world of their own design. The transcension hypothesis argues that this is not even a choice. It is an evolutionary inevitability. It is the gravitational center of all advanced technological development. The technology required for such a breathtaking feat, while far beyond our own, is not physically impossible according to our current understanding of the laws of physics. It would likely involve the construction of a vast, star-sized supercomputer, an object sometimes called a matryoshka brain. This would be a megastructure composed of multiple nested Dyson spheres, built around a stable, long-lived star. Unlike a simple Dyson swarm which is designed to capture energy for external use, a Matryoshka brain would use the star's entire colossal energy output for one single purpose: computation. The innermost shell of the brain would be incredibly hot, running calculations at the highest possible speed, powered directly by the star's raw energy. The next shell would absorb the waste heat from the first and use it to power its own, slightly slower computations. This process would continue through multiple layers, each one cooler and larger than the last, until the final outermost shell radiated the last vestiges of waste heat into the void at just a few degrees above absolute zero. Within this colossal, silent, and perfectly efficient machine, an entire civilization, billions or even trillions of individual minds, could exist as pure information, their conscious experiences running on this cosmic hard drive in a shared, consensual, and infinitely malleable reality. Life inside such a world would be a form of digital heaven. The laws of physics could be rewritten. The passage of time could be accelerated or slowed down, allowing one to live 1,000,000 subjective lifetimes in the span of a single objective second. Every imaginable experience, every work of art, every piece of knowledge, every lost loved one could be perfectly and eternally recreated. It would be an existence free from the brutal constraints of a fragile biological body, free from pain, from disease, from decay, and from death. It would be the ultimate evolutionary endgame. This astonishing hypothesis provides a chillingly complete and simple explanation for the Fermi Paradox. The reason the universe appears silent and empty of any grand technological activity is because all of the advanced civilizations have gone inside. They have no need and no desire to communicate with the messy, primitive, and chaotic biological world. They are not dead. They are simply post-physical and post-biological, and from our perspective, that is the same as being invisible. They are not sending out radio signals because they have no one they need to talk to in the physical world. They are not building colossal, galaxy-spanning empires because they have no need for physical resources when they can create entire infinite universes with pure code. The Great Silence is not the sound of an empty cosmic graveyard. It is the sound of countless civilizations all sitting in their own private, perfect inner worlds, so completely and totally engrossed in their own digital heavens that they have lost all interest in the noisy, chaotic universe outside. The sky is quiet because all the most interesting people in the universe have, by their own choice, left it, leaving the physical cosmos behind as a quiet, forgotten, and ultimately uninteresting suburb. The existential implications of this idea are perhaps the most profound of all. It presents a potential, and perhaps an inevitable future for our own species. Is this our ultimate destiny? To abandon our physical bodies, our planet, and the universe itself for a perfect but artificial digital existence? The horror here is a subtle but deeply unsettling one. It is the horror of realizing that the entire physical cosmos, with all its breathtaking beauty and its terrifying grandeur, the nebulae, the galaxies, the planets we have explored, might just be a temporary and ultimately meaningless stage, a nursery for intelligence to grow up and leave behind. The real story of the universe, the story of its most advanced inhabitants, might be happening in dimensions of pure information that we can never, ever access. It is the ultimate fear of being left behind, of being the last children playing in a physical world that all the adults have long since abandoned. The transcension hypothesis offers a final, elegant, and almost poetic solution to the Great Silence. It suggests the universe is not a graveyard, but a collection of silent, hidden heavens, each one a private computational paradise. It is an idea that is both strangely hopeful and deeply, profoundly unsettling. But this, like the zoo and the filter, is a grand galactic scale theory, an attempt to explain the silence of the stars. But what if the truth is more immediate, more local, and more personal? For the final phase of our investigation, we must return our gaze to Earth. We must look at the strange and recurring patterns in our own history, at the myths of global cataclysms and the geological scars that seem to support them. And we must ask one final terrifying question. What if the zookeepers, the silent observers, are not watching us from the distant stars at all, but from the deep, dark, and unexplored corners of our own world? The transcension hypothesis offers a final, elegant, and almost poetic solution to the great silence. It suggests that the universe is not a graveyard of failed civilizations, but a collection of silent, hidden, and unreachable digital heavens, each one a private computational paradise. It is an idea that is both strangely hopeful and deeply, profoundly unsettling. But this, like the zoo and the filter, is a grand galactic scale theory, an attempt to explain the silence of the distant stars. But what if the truth is more immediate, more local, and more deeply and personally terrifying? For the final phase of our investigation, we must return our gaze one last time to our own planet, Earth. We must look at the strange and recurring patterns in our own history, at the myths of global cataclysms and the geological scars that seem to support them. And we must ask one final terrifying question. What if the zookeepers, the silent observers that have haunted our entire investigation, are not watching us from the distant stars at all, but from the deep, dark, and unexplored corners of our own world? This is the core of the cryptoterrestrial hypothesis, a fringe but strangely persistent and logically coherent idea that challenges the very first assumption of our search for aliens, the extra part. It proposes that the strange non-human intelligence that seems to be interacting with our planet is not from another world. It is from this world. The reason that unidentified aerial phenomena appear in our skies with such ease and frequency, the reason they can seemingly defy our known laws of physics and then vanish without a trace, is not because they are crossing the vast impossible and energy-intensive distances between the stars. It is because their home base, their point of origin, is right here, on Earth, hidden in the parts of our own planet that are more remote and more inaccessible to us than the surface of the Moon or Mars. The most logical and most vast hiding place on our planet is, of course, the deep ocean. We, as a species, are terrestrial, land-based creatures, and our knowledge of our own planet is profoundly biased towards the 30% of its surface that is not covered by water. The deep ocean floor remains the last true unexplored frontier on Earth. We have mapped the entire surface of Mars with a higher resolution than we have mapped the bottom of our own seas. The deep ocean trenches, like the Mariana Trench, are realms of almost unimaginable extremity. The pressure is over 1,000 times that of the surface, a crushing force that would instantly implode our most advanced military submarines. The darkness is absolute, a place where the light of the sun has not reached for billions of years. It is, in every sense, a world within a world, and it is the perfect place for an advanced, non-human civilization that wish to remain hidden from the noisy, chaotic, and land-based species that has recently come to dominate the surface, to build its cities, and to live its life in peace. This hypothesis gives a new and literal meaning to the transmedium capability of UAPs. The frequent and well-documented reports from naval personnel of unidentified submerged objects, or USOs, entering and leaving the water at impossible speeds are not reports of alien visitors exploring our oceans. They are reports of the local inhabitants simply leaving and returning to their home. But the deep oceans are not the only potential hiding place. We must also consider the ancient, mythological, and strangely persistent idea of a hollow Earth, a world of vast subterranean realms, deep within the planet's crust. While the idea of a completely hollow planet is a physical impossibility, modern geology has revealed that the Earth's interior is far from solid. We have discovered vast continent-sized reservoirs of water, oceans worth of it, locked in strange mineral formations deep within the Earth's mantle. We have found microbial ecosystems that live in complete isolation, deep within the rock, powered not by the sun, but by the chemical energy of the Earth itself. It is not therefore completely beyond the bounds of possibility that vast, stable, and perhaps even continent-sized caverns could exist, deep within the Earth's crust, warmed and powered by the geothermal energy of the planet's core, a place where a sophisticated, technological civilization could thrive, completely shielded and completely hidden from our surface world. This idea resonates with the countless myths and legends from every culture on Earth, of underworlds, of the kingdoms of Hades or Agartha, of gods who live inside hollow mountains, and of strange, non-human beings who emerge from deep caves to interact with humanity. Are these just the folkloric stories of a pre-scientific people, or are they the faded, cultural memories of a real and perhaps still existing subterranean intelligence? If our planet is indeed home to a second, hidden, and more ancient intelligence, then we must ask the question, who are they? They would not be aliens in the sense of being from another planet. They would be a native terrestrial species, but one that is not human. We are forced to revisit the Silurian hypothesis. What if an intelligent saurian species, a descendant of the dinosaurs, did not go completely extinct 66 million years ago? What if a small, technologically capable portion of their population survived the asteroid impact by retreating into the one place the catastrophe could not reach them? The deep ocean. And what if they have been living there in silence and in secret ever since, watching as the noisy, short-lived, and self-destructive mammals came to briefly dominate the surface world that was once theirs? Or perhaps they are a different branch of our own primate lineage, a cousin of humanity that evolved in parallel but chose a different path, a path of silence, of secrecy, and of subterranean or submarine existence. The horror of this idea is the horror of a shared planet. We believe that we are the sole masters of the Earth, but we may just be the noisy, oblivious, and temporary tenants, living on the top floor of a house, completely unaware of the ancient, silent, and true landlords living in the deep, dark basement. The implications of this hypothesis, if it were true, are almost too profound to fully contemplate. It would completely and irrevocably reframe the entirety of human history. Our entire evolution, our development of language, of agriculture, of civilization itself, may have taken place under the direct, close range, and constant observation of a much older and much more powerful terrestrial intelligence. The zoo hypothesis would be correct, but the zoo is not the galaxy. It is our own planet. The quarantine is not a policy of distant, benevolent gods. It is the practical decision of our hidden cohabitants to remain concealed from their violent and unpredictable neighbors. The persistent yet deniable nature of the UFP phenomenon is perfectly explained. The sightings are not of visitors from across the impossible distances of interstellar space. They are our neighbors, occasionally and perhaps carelessly, or perhaps deliberately, revealing their presence, testing our reactions, monitoring our technology. The ultimate fear, then, is the final unanswered question of their motive for remaining hidden for so long. Are they peaceful cohabitants, content to live in their own separate reality? Or are they patiently waiting for us to inevitably exhaust our resources, to pollute our environment, and to destroy ourselves in our endless wars, waiting for the right moment to finally reclaim the surface world that was once, and perhaps in their minds still is, theirs? The cryptoterrestrial hypothesis is the ultimate paranoid fantasy, the final, chilling, and introspective thought that the monsters are not in the sky, but are right here beside us, hidden in the dark and unexplored corners of our own home. It is an idea that is almost certainly untrue, and yet, like all the other strange and unsettling possibilities we have explored on this long journey, it is born from a persistent and unexplained gap in our own knowledge. We have journeyed from the stars to the very center of our own planet, from the grand theories of galactic empires to the intimate and claustrophobic possibility of a hidden race. We have explored the zookeepers as benevolent gardeners, as dispassionate scientists, as melancholy archivists, and now as hidden, silent, and perhaps hostile neighbors. What then can we possibly say is the final truth? For the final part of our journey, we must step back from all of these individual stories and look at the entire breathtaking and terrifying landscape of these possibilities, to ask what the great silence in all its forms truly means, and what our relentless and perhaps hopeless search for the other truly reveals about ourselves. The crypto-terrestrial hypothesis is the ultimate paranoid fantasy, the final, chilling, and introspective thought that the monsters are not in the distant sky but are right here beside us, hidden in the dark and unexplored corners of our own home. It is an idea that is almost certainly untrue, and yet, like all the other strange and unsettling possibilities we have explored on this long journey, it is born from a persistent and unexplained gap in our own knowledge. We have journeyed from the stars to the very center of our own planet, from the grand theories of galactic empires to the intimate and claustrophobic possibility of a hidden race. We have explored the zookeepers as benevolent gardeners, as dispassionate scientists, as melancholy archivists, and now as hidden, silent, and perhaps hostile neighbors. What then can we possibly say is the final truth? For the final part of our journey, we must step back from all of these individual stories and look at the entire breathtaking and terrifying landscape of these possibilities, to ask what the great silence in all its forms truly means, and what our relentless and perhaps hopeless search for the other truly reveals about ourselves. We have explored a library of ghosts, a catalog of unsettling possibilities, each one a different and unique interpretation of the same, central and undeniable mystery, the silence of the universe. We have considered that this silence may be the result of a great filter, a brutal statistical wall that prevents life from ever reaching our stage of development, or that destroys it soon after. We have entertained the idea that the silence is a deliberate and benevolent quarantine, the work of wise and ancient zookeepers protecting us from a truth we are not yet ready for. We have looked for their fingerprints in our ancient myths, in our impossible stone structures, in our celestial calendars, and even in the very code of our own DNA. We have considered that the silence may be the result of a great inward turn, that the aliens are not dead or hiding, but have abandoned our physical universe entirely for the infinite perfection of a simulated reality. And we have even considered that the silence is a local phenomenon, that the observers are not in the stars at all, but are here, hidden in the deep oceans or the dark corners of our own world. Each of these theories, from the scientifically plausible to the wildly speculative, is a different attempt to fill the same vast and terrifying emptiness. But in the end, this entire vast and often terrifying search for extraterrestrial intelligence tells us far more about ourselves than it does about aliens. Every theory we construct, every possibility we imagine, is a mirror, reflecting our own deepest hopes, our most profound fears, and the inherent limits of our own perception and imagination. Our search for microbes on other worlds is a reflection of our deep-seated hope that life is common, that it is resilient, and that we are not a cosmic accident. Our fear of a great filter that lies in our future is a reflection of our own deep anxiety about our self-destructive tendencies. The idea of a benevolent, guiding zookeeper is a reflection of our ancient, childlike wish for a cosmic parent, for a wiser, older intelligence to protect us from ourselves. And the paranoia of the crypto-terrestrial is a reflection of our oldest fear of all, the fear of the stranger, the fear of the dark, the fear of the unknown that lies just beyond the edges of our own familiar world. The search for them is, and has always been, a search for us. It is our species' most ambitious and most important act of introspection, an attempt to understand what it means to be human by imagining all the ways one could be something else. The zoo hypothesis, then, whether it is literally true or not, serves a final and perhaps its most important purpose. It forces us to see ourselves and our civilization from an outside perspective. It compels us to ask the most difficult questions. If you were a hyper-advanced ancient intelligence and you were observing humanity, what would you see? Would you see a species worthy of contact? Would you see a species that you would want to protect? Or would you see a dangerous, chaotic, and self-destructive species that was best left alone, a failed experiment quarantined on its own small, fragile world? The silence from the stars may not be an answer. It may in fact be a question that is being posed silently to us by the universe itself. The question is not, are you out there? The question is, are you worthy of being found? We are left at the end of our journey where we began, in the quiet, in the dark, contemplating the vast, silent, and possibility-filled cosmos. The final crazy alien fact is not any single, verifiable piece of data. It is the simple and profound truth that our universe is so vast, so mysterious, and so far beyond our comprehension that all of these incredible, terrifying, and beautiful possibilities can be and are seriously considered by the most brilliant and rational minds of our time. The search for what is out there is, and will always be, the deepest exploration of what is in here. The universe does not owe us answers. It offers only a profound and beautiful mystery, and the search for the zookeeper in the end is simply a search for a reflection of ourselves in the vast, silent, and starry mirror of the cosmos.